Amen. Good song, good song. So last week, I was thinking about our church, and I was thinking about the Bible, and just everything, I guess. Stuff was going through my mind. And I come to the conclusion that there are two types of pastors in the church today. One pastor can take a message or a verse out of the Bible and find the point or points in it and expound on it for, an hour or 2 hours or more. And then the other pastor we have can expound on something for an hour or 2 hours or more and never make a point. You see? So there's really two types, and so I hope I'm kind of nearer that first guy than I am the second, but maybe I'm a little bit in between, I don't know. But the second conclusion was on those points, because the points in the Bible are there for a point, right? They're there for a reason. And they're as important today as they were 1,000 years ago. Some of the Bible was written, some of the Old Testament was written as early as 1,500 years BC before Christ. And then the New Testament, of course, was written mostly before the first 1st century. And so some of this word in the Bible goes back 3,500 years, and it's still relevant. It's still important. It's never going to go out of style. It offers us life, is what it offers. And so what I want to do for the next couple weeks or so, I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, I don't know. I just want to talk to you about faith. All of a sudden I feel it's important just to speak to you about faith. And so I'm going to go through the Bible and take out some stories that show us faith and what faith is. And then I'm just going to expound upon them and show you maybe some points that I found in each one of those verses. So let's look and see what we can learn today from Matthew 9:18. And these, I'm going to talk today about 2 healings. You'll remember them as soon as I get into them. 2 healings that Christ performed that required faith. They required unbelievable faith. I mean, just pure faith. And I want to talk to you about that. Matthew 9:18 says, "While he," Jesus, "spoke these things to them, behold, a ruler came and worshipped him, saying, 'My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live.'" Now, in Luke, this is taken from the book of Matthew, but in Luke we learned that this father's name was Jairus. And we also learned that he was a man of high importance. He was a ruler in the synagogue. And what stands out in that verse to me is that this ruler of the synagogue, now remember the synagogue doesn't believe in Jesus, right? The Jews don't believe in Jesus, but yet here he is. He comes to Jesus. It would be like a pastor of a church perhaps going to another church and disavowing Jesus. I mean, it just doesn't, it's kind of funny, I think, not funny ha-ha, but funny that he comes and he realizes that Jesus can help him in this predicament. And so my first point that I guess I want to make is that when his daughter died, when there was a calamity in his life, when there was a problem in his life, when there was something going on that he needed Jesus, he openly came to Jesus, right? And we have people like that today, don't we? That they just won't come to Jesus no matter what's happening. Come to church with me. Let me introduce you to my church family. We have a great time in church. Come and worship with us. No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in God. I'm not going to go, or I'm too busy. But let something happen, and they're the first one sometimes through the door, which is okay too. But it's just a point that I want to make that here's a point. Would you go to Orlando right now and jump on a plane that you knew wouldn't make its destination? Of course not. Nobody would do that. But that's what people are doing every day, aren't they? They just buy a ticket onto this airline and they just sit back in the chair. They enjoy the food, they enjoy the drinks, they enjoy the flight, perhaps the movie. But someday it's going to end. And when it ends, they're going to be in trouble. And they're going to be surprised. Oh, I was having such a great time. And I think this is where this Jairus was at one point until that calamity came. I guess in this case, the plane went down and he had to turn to Jesus Christ. And that's okay too. If you come to Jesus Christ laughing and smiling and having a fun, or if you come to him crying and broken and wrecked, that's okay. It doesn't matter as long as you accept him. So another point I wanted to make, this reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi. Remember him? Mahatma Gandhi. Remember him? He was a well-known Hindi. There's his picture.
Yeah.
He doesn't have much hair, does he? I'll be like that in a couple of years, I'm afraid. But he said, he said, if it weren't for Christians, I'd become a Christian. That's his quote. If it weren't for Christians, I'd become a Christian, because he saw us as nothing but hypocrites. And especially in the church at that time, because in the church at that time there was segregation. And he said, why isn't the church taking care of this? If they, I would become a Christian if it weren't for Christians, because I don't like this. Well, the thing about it was he let something worldly take over something spiritually. He should have left it into the hands of God and become a Christian. God will take care of it. But he didn't. And here's the thing. Weeks before his death, he wrote a letter that said this. Now remember, this is weeks before his death. And here's what he wrote. I have only a short time to live, perhaps 6 months or more. But obviously he didn't, because it was like 3 or 4 weeks later that he died. I have only a short time to live, perhaps 6 months or less. And for the first time in my life, I am totally depressed and despondent. And he died within weeks. He realized he was on that plane and he was going down. And he realized that he'd banked his entire life on that ride. Isn't that awful? It is, it's awful. So think of Jairus now. Jairus finally turns to Christ. He turns to the Messiah for help. And he has everything to lose, doesn't he? He's a ruler in the synagogue. He can lose his position. He can lose his income. He can lose his family. He can be thrown out of the synagogue, which was the church back then, or the synagogue back then, or the temple back then was the Jews' life. That's where everything happened. That's where their social gatherings happened and everything. And he could be excommunicated from it all and just thrown away. But his faith was so great in Jesus Christ that he knew what he lost was nothing compared to what he would gain. Understand? Right? Verse 19, so Jesus arose because he came to him and said, help me, Jesus, my daughter's dead. So Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And suddenly a woman who had flown of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched the hem of his garment. So picture this. Jesus is walking. His disciples are apostles. The disciples are around him. He's walking. There's a huge crowd. And in the back of the crowd, there's a lady who's been bleeding for 12 years. And all she wants to do, we're talking about faith, right? She has enough faith that all she wants to do is run out there and just touch him. Just touch his robe. He says in Matthew 9:21, if only I may touch his garment, I shall be made well. That's faith. So we have two people here, two stories, one with great faith and another one with great faith. Now in the days of Jesus, if you remember, because I talked about this maybe a month or so ago, I can't remember exactly when, but I had mentioned the fact that a robe, a priest's robe back in that time, the hem of the robe was considered holy. And what she wanted to do is just go up and touch the hem of that robe. And we talked about the bells and the pomegranates on the robe. If you remember, there was a pomegranate bell, pomegranate bell, pomegranate bell. And the bells, the pomegranates, stopped the bells from tinkling together and just becoming calamity. But now with those things, all of these bells were tuned to a frequency so that you just had, when the priest was walking, you had this melodious sound that just drifted out of the temple. And so we had the bell, of course, is the word of God, a picture of it, and the pomegranate is the fruit of the Spirit, you see, coming through in the New Testament. And so anyway, all she wanted to do was touch that robe because she thought that it was, and she was true, that it had some magical power in it in that sense. Matthew 9:22, but Jesus turned around. When she touched it, she touched the robe, he felt his power leave him, and it says, Jesus turned around, he saw her and said, be of good cheer, daughter, your faith has made you well. And the woman was made well from that hour. Now, the Bible doesn't tell this, but here's another point I think we can take from this. Jairus, right, is in front of Jesus. Come on, Jesus. Hey, listen, if you're going to save my daughter, it better be quick because she's been dead a while. So come on, let's go. In the meantime, we have a lady coming up and touching the robe, and he stops. feels the power come out of him and turns. I can see Jairus now grabbing and going, come on, Jesus, come on. We don't have time. Hurry up. And I think the point we can take from that is, have you ever felt like you're not getting the blessings you deserve? I've heard of people, I used to think to myself, how come this person is so blessed? And this person is so blessed? And this person is so blessed? And I'm not. How come? And I think that's what we can take from that too, is that blessings come to us individually from each and every one of us receives blessing after blessing after blessing, but its blessing is tailored specifically to you and I, and it will come not in our good time, but it will come in his good time. And when it comes in his good time, everything's great. Because if he'd have sent me Sherry 10 years before I met her, I wouldn't have anything to do with her. Well, I was too young. But that's the blessings that we get. Each one is tailored for each one of us, and it comes in his good time. So that's another point I think you can take from that. Look at Matthew 9:23-24. Jesus came now to the ruler's house, saw the flute players and the noisy crowd waiting, and he said to them, "Make room, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. Girl's not dead. We saw her die. Sure, she's not dead, Jesus. The moon's made of cheese too, right? Come on in. You know, are you messing? Why do people call on you, Jesus? What can you do? What are you here for? She's dead. She's been dead for quite some time. Why are you here? You see, you hear that scoffing in people? You hear that? But in the book of Matthew, we learn it's even worse than that, because we learn, this is the wording in Matthew, they laughed him to scorn, which means it wasn't a giggle, it was a roar, it was laughter, it was belly slapping, good time back slapping laughter. Look at you, Jesus, what a fool you're making of yourself. And the point from this is, I think, is that Jesus has taken just a step into the house. We'll see later in the verse where he actually came in, but he's kind of right at the doorstep of that house, and he looks inside, and it's full of people mocking at him. So let's break it down a little bit. You and I look at death differently than they did. Death during that time, you would hire a bunch of guys to come and mourn for you and play harps and wail for you and all of this. And so that's what Jesus was entering into, and then these folks didn't believe in Jesus in the first place, and so they were scoffing him. But Jesus says, if you look at this earlier, he says she has fallen asleep. And here's the thing. In the Bible, and I can't remember every book, but I know the Gospels, in the Gospels, there's probably 4 or 5, and also I think in Corinthians and some of the other books too, 4 or 5 times Jesus speaks of a believer, and he says they've fallen asleep. He doesn't say death. He says they've fallen asleep. So what does that mean to you? If he's fallen asleep, what does it mean? He's going to wake up again, right? He's going to wake up again. She's going to wake up again. We're all going to wake up again. We simply fall asleep because there is no such thing as death in our vocabulary as Christians. It's just not there, because death is separation. Death is final. Death is terminal, and that's it. But not to us. And everybody's just sleeping. Interesting. I can actually picture folks when they die. I can actually picture their spirit and their soul rising above their body, and they look down on their body and they see their body, and suddenly there's a hand on their shoulder. Don't worry about that, son. You won't need it. You're going to have a much better body someday. You were only sleeping. Come with me. I want you to listen to this. Jairus' daughter that we're speaking of here today, when she arose from the dead, she was hungry. If you read this story on your own, you'll find out she was hungry. There was the widow's son. When he rose from the dead, he began to speak. And finally, when Lazarus, remember Lazarus, what did Lazarus do when Jesus raised him from the dead? He walked out of the tomb. Now, you've got One hungry, one speaking, and one walking. The Trinity, remember that? Remember we talked about the Trinity? So you got three things right there. You know what that reminds me of? A born-again Christian. A born-again Christian. When we are born again, we wake up hungry for the Word. When I was born again, when I came up out of that swimming pool that we went to, I couldn't get enough of this book. I still can't get enough of this book. I am hungry. I'm starving for the Word. We then speak the Word. We want to give the Word to everybody. I'm hungry for this Word. I want you to know this Word, and I want you to understand this Word. And then finally, we're going to teach the Word. Whether you teach it up here or you teach it down there, whether you teach it to a group or whether you teach it to a family or you teach it to yourself. But isn't that you and I being born again? I love that analogy that we have. Remember last week, coincidence? I don't think so. Matthew 9:25, but when the crowd was put outside, interesting point too. A lot of interesting points in here, isn't there? When the crowd was put outside, he went in and took her, the girl, by the hand, and she arose. What's the point there? Well, remember Jesus went back to his hometown and he was prepared to do miracles. Remember that story in the Bible? He was prepared to do miracles and he couldn't do them. Why couldn't he do them? Because they didn't believe in him. Nobody believed in him. And here we have people mocking him and he's not going to come in the door. And if you're mocking him, I was mocking him for years at one time. Yeah, Jesus, sure, right? Okay, little green man on the moon and all that stuff too. But if you're mocking him, he's not going to come in. It's only when we stop mocking him and allow him in. He's not going to break into our house. He's not going to break into that house. It's only when those mockers were thrown out by the owner of the house, just like I had to throw out the mocker in me, only then would he come into my house and your house. And then verse 26 says, and the report of this went out into all the land. So of course everybody heard about this. Well, okay, let's quickly break this down just a bit more. Here's what we know about faith. Here's a story. John 11, 23, 26. Remember Martha and Mary when Lazarus died? We just spoke of him just a second ago. Jesus said, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection of the life. And the life. And he who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And what does she say? She says, I know he will rise in the resurrection at the last day. And there's a big difference between, yeah, let's go do it, and I know it will happen. You know, a lot of times we get all bummed up on theology and doctrine and all of this stuff. And I know that there's a resurrection on the last day. But he's certainly not going to raise that man out of the grave today. No, that's not right. Don't bring your church into all of this. Bring your heart and your mind and your soul into all this. Yes, I believe in you and you can do anything. And you can do it today. You see, there was faith there, but I don't know. I don't want to call it fake faith, but there was faith in up here. I know the book tells me that there'll be a resurrection on the last day. Well, faith needs to come from here. I know you can resurrect me right now if you want to. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, in a way, she's kind of right in the sense that we always look forward to our glorious future and not our inglorious, shameful past. But that's what Christ is dealing with, our past. He's wiping all that away from us. And when we fall into a trap like that, who's set the trap like that? Satan. Oh, he'll do it in his own good time when he's ready, and it won't. Don't worry. You probably never even know when it happens. But you probably die before it happens. No, we don't have to keep petitioning him and petitioning him and petitioning him because I found out a long time ago. All you got to do is tell him once. Me, you have to petition because I don't remember half the stuff you tell me. I just don't. I'm a human and I'm in error. But if you go to him and tell him we've got a problem and you need some help with it, you don't have to ask. Tell him. He's not like, oh, thanks for reminding me. I forgot about that. It doesn't work that way. He may not act on it tomorrow. He'll act on it in his own good time, which will be the best time for you and me, right? Then Martha, I think she vindicates herself in verse 27. She says this. She says, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who has come into the world. I know you can do this. It's written in the Bible that you'll come. I know you can do this. But then all of a sudden, yes, I know who you are. I've changed my mind. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and you're here in the world right now, so you can do it right now. So our faith needs to be more than knowledge. It needs to have some heart. It needs to have some heart in our faith. We need to have something in it. Matthew 25, one more quick point. But when the crowd was put outside, he went in. You see that? The crowd that was scoffing him, oh, they're gone. Now I can go in. Here's another point, too. In 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, Elijah and Elisha are walking along together. Here's what happened. It says, then it happened as they were two prophets. One was a greater prophet, one was a less great, well, they're both great prophets. One was greater than the other a little bit. Then it happens as they continued on and talked that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up into heaven. But Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more. And he took hold of his clothes and he tore them into pieces. Now Elijah, the great prophet, was taken up into heaven in a flaming chariot, and Elisha was left behind. But before Elijah was taken up, Elisha asked that he receive a double portion of Elijah's prophecy. And the Bible says he did. So he became a prophet. And he received Elijah's spirit of prophecy. But there were other people in Jericho who didn't believe him. He didn't believe in him, that he was who he said he was and that he was a prophet. And so 2 Kings 2:23 says, then he, Elisha, this is the man that received the second blessing of all of Elijah's wisdom and prophet, went up from Bethel, and as he was going up the road, some youths, if you underline that in your Bible if you want to, some youths came from the city. Remember, what was that show? You Utes. There was a movie about them or something. Some Utes came from the city and mocked him and said to him, go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head. So what they're saying, we don't believe that Elijah went up. We believe you're lying, and we don't believe you got his prophecy, and we don't like you, so go up, you bald head. If it's the truth, go up, you old bald head, go up, right? Now, I want you to look at that. It says some use. I want you to look at that. That's in the New King James. I want you to look now at this next verse in the Old King James and see what it says. Little children. There come forth little children out of the city. Now, this is very important. The translation of the Bible is very important if you want to understand what's going on, because little children is the best word here. In the Old King James, they translated it correctly. And what they're talking about, they're not talking about the physical age of these people who were mocking them. They're talking about the spiritual age and the fact that they were younger in physical age than all of the elders, okay? And so that's what he was talking about. He was saying, where is it now? I didn't write it down. I can tell you though, the same word is used to describe Isaac when he was 28 years old and Joseph when he was 39 years old. That word, little children, I think it's like B-A, not Baal, B-A something in the Hebrew. You can look it up when you go home in your Hebrew dictionary. It means little children. It means spiritually small. And so, look at the next verse. Because they didn't believe in Elijah, because they mocked him, it says he turned around in 2 Kings, he turned around and looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of the Lord. I curse you for your disbelief, he said, for having no faith. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42, killed 42 of the youth who was mocking him, these these spiritually young people who was mocking him and mocking God, mocking him and mocking his ministry. Basically, I guess is the way you could say it. So, what's the lesson about all this? Well, first, have faith in Jesus. He lives. He's the only way to the Father. Believe in him like we all do. Secondly, believe in his death for us and his resurrection. Have faith in that, which we do. But also remember this, we're not fighting flesh and blood, are we? Look at Ephesians 6. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the spirits and principalities, the powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. So that's what our fight is. It's not with one another. But when somebody's mocking you, when somebody's mocking your religion, when somebody's mocking your faith, when somebody's mocking your ministry, go to war with them. Not this type of war. Go to the war of words. Go to a battle with them. Bring out the word of Jesus Christ. Talk to them about Jesus Christ. You don't know what you're talking about. You're scowling at me and you're mocking me, but you don't know me. You don't know. You haven't seen Jesus in me. Let me show you my Jesus. You see? We don't have to take that mocking, because if we don't take the mocking, then Jesus comes in. And if we can get the mocking out of them, Jesus will go in. So that's a little bit about faith, and that's a few points on those verses. Amen?